All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Free to Grow CFO podcast, where we dive deep into conversations about scaling a D2C brand with a profit focused mindset. I'm your host, Jon Blair, founder of Free to Grow CFO. We are the go to outsource finance and accounting firm for 8 and 9 figure D2C brands. And today I'm here again with my good buddy, Clay Banks. Clay, what's happening, man?
What's up, John? Glad to be back on the show with you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. I think we talked on Cyber Monday. I remember that distinctly last time, and you were chatting.
Yeah,
You
probably the
mentioned.
craziest time of the year for a e-commerce brand to step out and do a podcast. But we had everything kind of planned, and everything was working pretty smoothly, so it worked out for us.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't heard that episode with Clay, it's a few weeks back. I highly recommend going and checking it out. A lot of really great meaty conversation. Um, Clay has a really extensive entrepreneurial background and definitely in the e-commerce world. Most recently, he's the founder of an e-commerce brand called Glory Light, and he also runs a consultancy called In Pace Line. Um, if you want a more comprehensive background on Clay, I highly recommend going back and checking out that episode. But I wanted to bring him back because what we didn't get into that episode, we kind of touched on a few times, but Clay has a really extensive background in is new product launch. And so today's topic is we're going to talk about how to fast track your first product launch, going from idea to market. And this is super, super important because we see time and time again at Free to Grow CFO, we get asked all the time, like, hey, can I launch this product? And here's the thing, you as a founder, I would say 95% of the founders we work with, they're very heavily product oriented. They're super excited about the problem that they're solving in the marketplace with their product. And so with that comes what? Comes the propensity to launch too many products or to just always be excited and always be thinking of product ideas. And the reality is there a place for new product launches in scaling an e-com brand? Of course there is, but there's also a great danger, right, in doing it the wrong way and not having a framework to use. And Clay is hands down the most knowledgeable guy I know, especially in the e-commerce world when it comes to thinking about new product launches. So really quick, Clay, before we get into like the meat of this, um, why don't you just run the audience through briefly your background as it relates to launching new products?
Yeah, John. Glad to be on with you again today. Launching products and building things that don't exist is a big passion for mine. I've been starting mostly physical good product companies ever since I was 20 years old in college. That was 24 years ago. I've taken, I'm guessing, probably 30 different products to market, all in the everything from consumer electronics to food products to my first. I kind of show some of them because I'm like a show and
Heck
tell
yeah.
kind of guy.
Heck yeah.
When I was in college, we published this book called A Vols Walk. This was when Amazon was just a bookstore. So put yourself back into 2002,
Yep.
and the nuances of selling a book that had the power T on the book and the color orange, collegiate licensing, from selling it into Borders Books, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, um, and learning about working with other my co-founders in that business, and ultimately a hard lesson learned about margin in that one. But probably most famous for building a company, starting a company called Haven Lock. My business partner and I invented and patented a home security lock that could detect and prevent home break-ins. It would alert you through an accelerometer back to a mobile phone through an app, or to your Google Nest, or to your Alexa. And ultimately, that product had other peripherals that went with it, such as fobs and internet gateways that had to connect to it wirelessly. That whole company kind of spun out and created a product that we sold into schools and churches to prevent active shooters from getting into classrooms, which had its own set of peripherals and own set of wireless protocols. Um, Through that company, we created this battery. It's a 20 1,000 milliamp rechargeable battery to run things like lights or small electronics or charge things like your phone or something like that. We sold these on Amazon, our website, big on QVC. We sold a bunch of
Mm.
these on QVC. Um, right now, I'm running a company called Glory Light. It's a kids' nightlight that projects Bible verses on the ceiling. So we'll kind of use this as an example of everything we want to talk about today, um, and kind of how to get a product idea to market as fast, as cheap, and as efficiently as possible, so that you don't build something that no one will buy, or you build something that is broken from the first place. So
Yeah.
going to be using Glory Light as an example throughout most of the concepts and strategies that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, and actually another layer that I want to add to like why this episode is so important. Why why can product development failures be so costly to a business? Think about it. Product development is one of those functions in a business that requires resources and collaboration with every single function in the business. You have to collaborate with accounting and finance. They're involved in sourcing and, replenishment planning and product design and marketing, sales channel selection, right? All of these different things. And here's the thing, if you design the wrong product at the wrong time, you may be designing in, right, the failure financially of that product. So, like when we as CFOs talk about unit economics and margins, or you talk about the ability to scale advertising, so much of that is designed into the product up front. And so you actually have to consider, you don't just have to consider the technical engineering aspects of getting a product made. You have to consider every single piece of the business and design accordingly, right? And so there is a lot at stake, and it's also the reason why it's so easy to do wrong, right? And so, with that being said, let's chat first about kind of stage one, as you've laid it out for us, is like concept to prototype.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. If you're an established business with all of these different teammates, so you talked about marketing and accounting and whatnot, right? If you're launching a new product or a service that on top of what you're currently doing, then it could be a distraction, right? But it could also be a big opportunity for new growth. If you're a first time founder and this is your first product or service, you're kind of wearing all the hats, right? You are the marketing guy, you are the accounting guy, you are the designer, you are the product dev guy, you are the salesperson. So um, when we think about this, I'm trying to limit the impact on that one founder to get to market as fast and as cheaply as possible. And same thing for a bigger business that might have more people on the team. And they're all common struggles, whether you're a one-man band trying to launch a brand or you're an established brand trying to add on or create something of value to your existing customer base. And really the concepts and the things that we're talking about today are going to correlate to both. And ultimately, we're going to be taking and talking about how we turn an idea into a tangible product or a service. Okay, and kind of the steps that we go through, and yeah, we'll kind of dive in, John. Um, when talking about Glory Light, okay, it's this brand here. I'm going to use this one as the example for most everything today. I at the point of launching this one in 2022, um, uh, a friend of mine who I knew and had an existing relationship for over a decade kind of came to me with the idea. It was not my idea. And his basic concept was, hey, how could we put Bible verses into a kid's nightlight so that it shines a Bible verse on the ceiling? And when I'm thinking about this, before I even start to consider if I'm going to put my time and resources into something, I'm first going to go to do customer discovery. Okay. And for sake of this call and this podcast today, we don't have time to do customer discovery. Um, However, it's so important that it starts with customer discovery. And maybe that's a different call that we do later. I have an entrepreneur community and I coach a lot of people on customer discovery. And it's super important that before you ever even think about spending an hour or time or dollar resource to a product idea, it starts with customer discovery.
Can I
Okay.
add something really quick?
Yep.
When I first, I got an accounting degree, but I never went Big Four. I worked for an entrepreneur day one who designed and brought to market consumer electronics products that he saw like some sort of white space in the market, right? And he told me when I was 20 years old, working for him in my last year of getting a business degree, he's like, John, I don't care what you do, I don't care what space you're in, always do your marketing homework first. Always, 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 always. And if the marketing homework doesn't pan out, don't spend any more time on it.
Yeah. And another good thing to think about, exactly on top of what you're saying, don't get so deeply emotionally connected and involved and ignore the real numbers and the real signs coming from that customer discovery. Because sometimes we can have this sense of passion and ownership once we start talking about something to our customers or perceived customers, that we put these blinders on,
For sure.
and that can easily derail you into the value or the superpower that you're creating. And I always tell founders this, and it's a goal that I try to live by when I'm thinking about building a product, starting a product, or iterating on a product, the 10-to-1 ratio. So I'm going to spend 10-to-1 of my time doing customer discovery interactions. And like I said, we don't have enough time to go through all the customer discovery stuff today and what types of questions, how to get to pricing, how to get to the real value prop of what you're trying to get. But 10-to-1. So if you're spending 10 hours doing customer discovery, then you can spend 1 hour on actually building and engineering and designing and crafting that product or service. So if you spend
That's a
10,
really easy kind of like rule of thumb to
yeah,
use. And I will say, to further elaborate on what you're saying, like the trap psychologically is, like, I think it's called a confirmation bias, right? That like if you do everything in a bubble, like let's say I go do my own research just online, and I'm not soliciting the perspective of a customer or a potential customer. I can just go research my way through confirmation bias to confirm my initial assumptions and hypotheses are correct, right? Whereas when you get out there and you go talk to a third party, and most importantly, someone who is a potential customer, it you can still trick yourself, right, into thinking that you're right through something like a confirmation bias, but at least you're if you're doing what Clay's talking about, 10-to-1, 10-to-1, you are spending 10 times as much time getting third party perspective to hopefully fill in the blind spots that you have, right?
yeah, and definitely put that perspective. So you're out there talking to customers, and this is kind of leading us more toward a customer discovery exercise. But if they're giving you good feedback and you're nodding and you're agreeing and they're listening and they're agreeing with you, that's sometimes a good sign. But really, are they pulling out a credit card to buy
Mm.
it? Are they anxious to pre-order it? Those are the types of things you want to try to get to. And if you're not ready for that pre-order state or you're not ready for that transaction state, then at minimum ask for an email address or some way to follow back up, because if they're willing to give you their email address and they don't know you, then the likelihood of what you were talking about building with them resonated enough to say, I'm willing to stay connected to learn more. And that's usually your first launching base to when you do launch your product. So when we were building Haven Lock, we literally started with a wooden prototype. And then we moved to like a foam prototype, and then we hired a CAD designer, and this was all kind of way before AI and stuff. But we started taking pictures on our phone of the CAD designs. And when I was standing in line at a coffee shops or waiting on a meeting or whatever, I would just spark up conversation like, hey, we're trying to solve home break-ins. It happens every 13 seconds in America. We're creating this product that does this, and I'll show it to them on my phone. And I'd start asking them questions. But I would always try to end that quick conversation with, do you mind if I grab your email address? Because when we launched on Kickstarter, after doing that customer discovery stuff for about 9 months, we had a good sized list to let those people know to go back us and fund the Kickstarter campaign. We did like $116,000 in 30 days. The bulk, like 70 of it, came in the first day.
Wow.
So all of that kind of led up to having a sounding board to launch the product, right? When we're talking about creating a product or idea, we want to have a clear problem and a clear solution to that problem. Unless you're like a food product and you're trying to solve like a savory or a delicacy type of thing.
Sure.
Um, but usually 99% of the time, a customer has a problem and you have a product or service that solves it, right?
So really quick, just to kind of summarize a little bit of this, we're talking about going from concept idea to a prototype. Be as early prototypes, quote, right? Don't They can be as simple as sketches, mock-ups, something very simple and cheap and something that you can probably iterate on really, really quickly and just get it in front of people and start gauging feedback and reactions and all of that before you go on to physical prototypes, unless for some reason you need one, right?
For sure, absolutely. Start. I mean, now with AI, there's all these image generators that you can create to get to concepting faster. All stuff in Canva that you can kind of design and lay out. We actually, back when we started Havenlock, we had to hire a CAD engineer, right? And the rapidness of what AI has brought and the cheapness at scale, you can start to really get some really good ideas in a visual state that you can start to do your customer discovery with. And for sure, sketches and mock-ups is always the starting point. Don't actually go to a physical state yet, or do what we did and go to Home Depot and buy some wood and carve it out, or
Mm-hmm.
some foam. We got the foam at like a Joann Fabrics or something like that. Um, I coach a lot of high school entrepreneurs, and I'm like, go to Hobby Lobby and just, they don't have any money, right? I'm not asking them to go buy this stuff, but go. This is an exercise that I take them through. Go to Hobby Lobby and list out the items that how you would build your prototype. There should be enough things inside of Hobby Lobby only to be able to pretty much get some sort of concept idea built, right?
I love that.
Um,
So you build out the concept so that you can demonstrate, so you can have conversations about it, right? Do it as quickly as you can and iterate quickly. What do you have any other like advice on iterating quickly and being efficient
yeah.
or even
So
effective with your iteration?
absolutely. You want to get that raw prototype out into the hands of as many people as possible, remembering the 10-to-1 ratio, right? And you're going through that customer discovery, asking them certain questions. They're giving you certain feedback. You're also gauging and trying to get qualitative and quantitative data that can help you guide the next iteration of that prototype. And ultimately, whether you're getting all the way to a final finished good in production, it's multiple iterations as fast as possible, and as cheap as possible, so that when you do take it to a manufacturing state and you're actually having to buy tooling and molds and jigs and stuff like that, um, when you go to put that type of capital up front, your customer is aligned. you have a higher degree of confidence that they're willing to buy it. You know the price point and all your pricing strategies already worked out at that point before you go make that capital investment in tooling and equipment.
Okay,
Um,
so really quick, I want to point something out here because I've been having a lot of conversations about this recently, and actually had one on the episode I recorded right before this. This actually, what you're talking through is, I would say, in my opinion, it is universal sound investment strategy. And let me take that a step further to make it a little more tangible. I have I'm also a real estate investor, and I also have one client that I coach. We're not fractional CFOs for them. I'm an EOS coach for them, and they're one of the biggest ground up multifamily real estate developers in Texas. Very sound investors. And they always talk about what's the next amount of capital we have to go hard on. When that means, like, what money are you putting down for the next stage? So, like, when they get a property under contract to just due diligence, they're trying to put the least amount of money down to get it under contract and give themselves as much of a diligence window to spend as much time doing diligence before they have to go hard on additional earnest money because they're taking the next step on that investment, right? This is actually no different than that. It's just investing in a new product. What you're saying is, generally speaking, when it comes to investment strategy in new products, let's let's be careful, let's be sound and strategic about how much capital we're committing to, right? Before we go on to the next stage. And here's the series of actions that we want to take before committing more capital, so that we have removed risk, right? We've removed risk, and we've given ourselves some sense of additional probability of success. Would you agree?
1,000%. That's a great analogy. In most cases, if you're a first time starting a service or product, you don't have a ton of cash resources in most cases, right? So you're having to go raise money from some sort of outside investor or outside source. And the more data that you have from doing this due diligence, this period of due diligence, the better. And the more from a third party public facing due diligence source it is, the better. So I get that a Kickstarter campaign may not be the right avenue for every product or service. It's very male dominant, blah blah blah. However, you can go create online communities. I've got a guy that I coach created an online Facebook group, and now has over 700 beta users into a service that he's built. Okay, started from a Facebook group. Okay, you can do this through a Reddit thread. I have this initiative and this strategy I call rent the room. Okay, go through the exercise of renting a room in your community. Okay, like at some sort of like it could be a restaurant, it could be just like a country club room or any kind of open space that you have to rent it, and you have to get warm bodies in the room that are 1 degree of separation from you. Okay, and you have to have at least coffee and water there, and you have to be talking about your product or service. So that's a hard exercise for people to go through, but it makes you go through getting out there and filling a room with bodies. Okay. And you can do that in a virtual state too. Maybe it's a webinar, all right? Right. You don't, I get that everybody may not live in a space, or your customer may not live in your community. But in a virtual way, host a webinar to try to get that feedback and do that due diligence. And then when you go out to raise money, or you go to put your capital at risk on the tooling and the next phases of development, you're making a more educated decision on that allocation of capital and that risk.
So if you okay, let's now talk about, like, how do you know it's time to start sourcing and set up a supply chain? You've gone through concept to prototype. How do you know it's time, and what do you start doing?
Okay, so I'm first going to look at what's the minimum path of resistance to get a what we call MVP, minimum viable product, in the hands of my customers that they're willing to make a transaction for. Okay, And I've got to put aside my long-term big grand vision for what I think is the real key core value of my product right away. Okay. So with Glory Light, for example, my big grand vision is an app enabled communication tool for parents to teach their kids the word of God. And we send Bible verses and Bible characters to the light via Bluetooth and have a community around helping parents guide their kids spiritually. Okay. That's my long-term vision. That's a lot to build. I got an app, I got to write hardware, firmware, software, right? All that takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. But how do I just build a light that takes these discs and I insert them into the light, right? Like what's the minimum viable product that I can offer and get to market as fast as possible?
That
Okay.
people vote for with their dollars. That's what that
That
they,
people
they
actually
actually
really,
they'll
we almost
purchase.
broke 1 million in sales last year in our first full year in business. I'm coaching this entrepreneur. She's created a date rape drug testing kit, right? It's on a keychain. It's called Spiky, spikyfirst.com. She has a big vision for this product, right? But for now, all she has done is gone out to Alibaba and bought simple keychains that she could put the test strips in. Okay, the packaging's not ideal, it's not perfect, but she's taking transactions. And by the way, she's a high school student.
I love it. When I always say people are voting with their dollars. That's the ultimate vote you want to get on your MVP, right? It's not just a verbal, "Hey, yeah, I would buy that." That they voted yes for your product with their dollars.
And what we want to get to is understanding the outcome that yes brings them,
Yes.
right? And when you buy let's call a smartwatch, for example, right? I'm not buying, yes, I am buying it for all the features and benefits that it has, right? It's got GPS, it's got altimeters, it's got all this cool bells and whistles. But I am buying it because it is helping shape my physical future self, right? It's helping me be a better athlete. It's helping me be a better performer, right? And the sense of pride, the sense of self-worth, the sense of confidence that brings is the outcome. And that's what I'm trying to coach people on is let's separate benefits and features from outcomes, right? And we start to say, what do we need to build to get the best outcome for our customer?
Yep. I love that. I love that. So as you start transitioning into sourcing and building a supply chain, besides taking your MVP, your minimum viable product into that, right? What are some of the best practices around sourcing, setting up the supply chain? It's a big task. So what advice do you have there?
So let's go ahead and assume you've done a lot of customer discovery and you have proof of product market fit and some social proof, right? That's when we're ready to start getting quotes and estimates from manufacturers, whether they're domestic or abroad. Okay, if it's a domestic supplier and you're wanting to be made in America, or your brand ethos has something to do with locally sourced type of products, for the manufacturers or the producers or the aggregators of those types of products here in America, they're going to want to have some confidence that you're worth dealing with. You're worth their time, right? And if you go to them prior to doing this customer discovery stuff that we're talking about, you come across as not yet ready for them to put time and energy into it. And I can tell you, building a product in America takes a lot of time and energy. Whether you're contracting them out or not, whether you have the resources to pay them or not, for them to take you seriously, there needs to be some sort of third-party validation of product market fit, okay? Especially in America, not so much overseas. When we were doing Haven Lock, we had data that we could present to different manufacturers on our Kickstarter campaign. We were starting to raise some capital. We had been featured in a lot of press publications, Forbes, CNET, TechCrunch, all these other types of publications, right? So when we went to a Berkshire Hathaway owned subsidiary and said, "This is what we're looking to have you contract manufacture," they took us seriously, and we stayed engaged with them for well over more than a year, if not 2 years, keeping them apprised of our prototyping process. They weren't prototypers, okay? They were manufacturers, right? So when we get through the final prototyping stages, we have built a relationship with them over a couple of years that had built confidence and rapport so that they could really help us go from a prototyping stage to a design for manufacturing and then ultimately design for test phase, right? If you're sourcing overseas, not so much. They'll sell you go to China, any Asia and Vietnam type of countries, looking to buy something, they're gonna sell you whatever you spec them. Okay,
Yeah,
so
even if
your
it's the wrong,
specs.
even if your specs are wrong, or I mean, I'm sure we saw this all the time at Guardian Bikes because at the time that I was there, we were making our bikes in China. Having to the Not that this challenge doesn't exist with U.S. manufacturers because it definitely does, but the extra level of care that you have to put into making sure that they are actually making the spec that you have provided to them is a huge, huge challenge with dealing with specifically factories in China.
Specifically China, they don't have I'm gonna call it, just for lack of a better term, they're not gonna push back on you, their customer, on the spec. They're gonna assume you've already dialed in your spec to 1,000% accuracy, and then they're just gonna make it. If once you get past the terms and the payment and all that stuff, they're just going to make it. And a US manufacturer that you've built rapport with and have a relationship with, they're going to say, is this spec or this specific piece of the spec in your best interest? And they're going to contest you, which is good. You want that, right? As a founder, they may be looking at something from a different perspective that you don't know, or you need to know. And they're good. They're just the nature of Americans. They're going to be more, I'll call it, friendly facing, in a way that says, "Hey, before we go spend time here, are we sure we want this design this way, or are there better options, or are there alternatives to this? Because downstream, it's going to cause this other problem." Right? That's a big thing, right? You may design something in on CAD, it looks great and it works and functions great, but actually, when it comes time to assembly, a human being can't do it, or it's very, very labor consuming. So like, we built a product with Havenlock, and it had nylon straps woven through a steel base plate, and Delrin, which is this thermoplastic that was flexible, and we sewed it together with nylon. All right, in CAD it worked great.
Yeah.
uh, on the production floor and on the assembly line, it was very difficult, and we had to train people on how to do that, and we had to buy a really expensive sewing machine. Like, who would have thought you would have had to buy a sewing machine, right? And those are just things that come up in the complexities of manufacturing. What I like to do first is there a white label opportunity for me to get close to what I want to build? So I'm now, like, I'm probably more, there's more ways to go about white labeling than just putting your logo on another product, right? I look for, first, before I go out and build the big dream, how do I find the real core value in something? And if I'm testing my brand in the market and trying to get more product market fit and proof of transactions, I really look at, is there a white labeling opportunity, somebody making something similar, right? Or can I combine two or three things that are already being manufactured for a different use case.
Totally.
And that's kind of how you leverage the next step before you go out and custom build something that requires a lot of tooling and a lot of capital expenditure.
Yeah, man. I mean, dude, this it takes my mind back to that like real estate investing example, right? Which is like there's multiple stages in a real estate deal. What's the minimum amount of capital that you can invest to get to the next stage? But what's the reason you want to get to the next stage? You want to learn a new set of you want a new set of learnings. And what is the point of that new set of learnings? It's the reduction of risk before you put down the next piece of capital. And so when you're talking about like white labeling, it's like, hey, for very little capital outlay, can I test selling this product that exists that gets the point across, right? Allows me to learn and confirm that, yeah, I think that I have removed a layer of risk and I'm willing to fork out the next dollars to make my own version of this, right? And so all of this is thinking about creative ways. Look, like the complete opposite of this is to go, hey, I've got this product in my head. It's got all the bells and whistles. I'm just going to make it. I'm going to order 10,000 of them. And I'm going to bring them in the US and then we're going to try to sell them. And it's like you either kill it, totally flop, or somewhere in the middle, right? And you learn all those, you end up having to learn all those hard learnings anyways, right? Just in but you've quite possibly outlaid a lot of time, capital, and actual physical like monetary capital, right? And so everything that Clay's going through is just like little tidbits of wisdom that he's accumulated over the years of like how do we learn the next set of learnings with the minimum amount of capital outlay to reduce risk before we outlay the next amount of capital on launching a new product. So if you've got the initial sourcing done and at least initial supply chain set up, and you're ready to launch, what are the best practices that brands need to be thinking about when they're getting ready to launch, or what you say is launching like a pro?
But as we lead into thinking about how we launch or actually deliver the product or the service for a transaction, we want to make sure that we understand our bill of materials, right? The list of items that go into manufacturing that product, right? That list can be 2 or 3 items, or it could be with Haven Locks thousands of items, and understanding the lead times per each item. And I'll make a simple example. If you're making a cake, you've got to have eggs, sugar, and flour, right? But if it takes you a week to get flour and 2 weeks to get sugar, but it takes you 6 weeks to get eggs, you've got to work backwards from that longest lead time, right? In Haven Lock's case, we had a 52-week lead time. It was
Man,
miserable.
we had that at one point at Guardian.
It had to do with we had to buy Bluetooth chips, and you guys probably remember in the news when all the automotive companies and everybody using Bluetooth couldn't get Bluetooth chips. Well, you as a cash flow exercise, in some cases you have to put out that cash to be able to buy that item. So you have to go and say, in 6 weeks I gotta have eggs at my facility, so I'm gonna buy the eggs now.
Sure.
Right? And then now the clock is ticking on that capital, right? Cost, time, money, it's capital. Boom, 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 right? You could be doing something else with that cash. So you've got to really get good at negotiating those longer lead items where your payment terms are more in your favor to help that cash cycle. Okay, so you got to really have what I call a costed bomb of a bomb is build of materials. Every single item that goes into your product, that's boxing, that's charging cables, that's plastic baggies, that's stickers, labels, printed inserts, everything, right? You list all that out, and what does it cost per piece? Okay, that's ultimately later on how we will find efficiencies in scale is on a per piece line basis. Do we know another printer, or can we go find another printer to make the printed insert, because we're now doing it at scale and we're charging $1 a piece now, but we can get it down to 72 cents, whatever, right?
For sure.
So we want that costed BOM, and that costed BOM is a living, breathing document. And it has your timelines with it. Okay, your timelines are how long does it take if we place an order today? How long is it going to take to get it? And then on top of that, you need to know what the payment terms are and what the MOQs are, minimum order quantities. Okay, so keep all that in a spreadsheet. There's a few other things that I track in that BOM outside of time, and things like tariffs and duties and stuff like that all have to be accounted for if you're going to be importing. But let's just say you're now you have a product that I would like to say is not your full dream product, but you're more than halfway there, and you're ready to put that product in the hands of customers. So over the period of time, however long it took you, whether it was in Glory Light's case, less than 90 days, in Havenlock's case, it was almost 5 years. So we had connection points of collecting email addresses of every person that we'd interact with, whether that was on our website or in person, to launch our Kickstarter campaign. Okay. Like I said, not everybody has a Kickstarter campaign, has a Kickstarter type of process to launch it, but you want to be building your what we call owned media list, so that you do have a established base to be able to put that out to, right? And owned media comes in the form of your Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok account followers, your email list, your SMS subscriber lists, or do you have a launch partner, somebody that already has an established customer base that is willing to maybe put out your product to their customer base in the form of some sort of commission or some sort of joint venture. If you don't have a sounding board, your customer acquisition costs are going to go up much higher because you don't yet have an established brand. You've got to go find new ways to establish your customer acquisition strategy. So a lot of times founders will go, oh, I'll just start running Google ads and Facebook ads, and I'll put it on Amazon. Okay, yes, that's definitely doable. Don't get me wrong. It takes a lot of time in training those algorithms to be able to start working in your favor and build some credibility and social proof on those types of platforms. So what I try to do is find some sort of affiliate network or build an affiliate network before I launch a product, so that can get those engines started where I don't have to go out and necessarily acquire every customer.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's sort of akin, I think in my mind, it's akin to the idea of like using a white label product first, right? To test product market fit and get people to buy before creating your own. When you're talking about like launching with partners, whether they're affiliates or otherwise, it's you're selling through their established network and social proof and following and whatnot, and you may layer on your own, over time, through your own, Meta and Google and, top of funnel paid advertising. But like, again, launching through someone else's following or platform can minimize the capital investment to get that first round of learnings, right? And again, it's all in the name of learning to reduce risk before the next capital outlay, right?
And you might be an established business. I've got a client right now. We're building. I'm not going to go into exactly what we're building, but it's a new, better version of something he already sells and distributes, but he's buying it from another party. Okay, so he already has a customer base. He already sells about 300 to 500 units of these a month. Okay, he already knows the buyer and has the relationship with the buyer, and he is going to build something better than what he's currently selling to that buyer, right? He's already got that customer base established. Now we're looking at what other channels are out there to sell besides going to that one buyer,
Got
right?
it. Yep.
So you might be a bigger business and already have a customer base, and that's why you see big companies get bigger faster, right? They have access to a customer base. If you're building a customer base from the start, you've got to find creative ways to leverage other brands or other affiliates or other influencers or whatever that already have access to potential customers in your core demographic.
So as post launch, um, we in kind of preparing for this episode, you outlined some common hurdles to overcome. What are those, and what's some of the advice? We can start with like financial constraints is one that you outline. What are some typical financial constraints that you see during launching a new product, and what are some thoughts around how to overcome them?
My biggest thing over my 20 something years is thinking I was hiring the right engineering talent
Hmm.
when in after spending a lot of money, a lot of time, found out they didn't have the expertise or they didn't know the next step of the game, right? So I might have hired like a firmware developer or an embedded developer, but they didn't know how to get that design that they created into a circuit board manufacturing protocol process that included, bed of nails testing and all this other stuff, right? And you got to kind of look at yourself and go, okay, what is that I don't know? I don't know. And surround you and the people that you're hiring with other competitive or other types of, I don't know, competition is not the right word. Um, so like in this case, if I'm hiring and working with an embedded developer on the design of a circuit board, go ahead and bring in who you think is going to be the manufacturer into the meetings and the conversations, because the two of them will figure out each other's problems or deficiencies or gaps or something that might have been missed. A lot
Yeah,
of
that's
times
interesting.
we
That's
we
interesting.
take where I've made the most mistakes. I would hire an engineer to do something that I couldn't do. I'm not an engineer. And they would give it back to me and I would think it's perfect, whether it's in CAD or it's actually they prototype something, and I would take it to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer would go, "You're nowhere near ready, buddy." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, we just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in engineering. I've got a prototype that shows that it works." And then they're like, "Yeah, but there's no injection molding designs for these pieces. The radiuses in the molds aren't called out." Like you're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Like I didn't know that needed to be done.
For sure.
And what I'm saying is try to put all the pieces together in a way that they each hold each other accountable for the next step. So if we put this into let's just call it a sports term, right? It's like running around a track passing a baton, right? I need to know that baton's going to be coming where I say it's going to be put, right?
For
You guys,
sure.
I know you
Yep.
might be listening to this, but like if I start to take off running and I put my arm back, that baton needs to go right in that hand, right?
For sure.
And that is the exact same way manufacturing is done. And if someone drops the baton or doesn't show up on time or doesn't do something, then the next person putting the leg of the relay together is not going to be able to do their job.
Yeah. Well, so there's another thing that comes to mind here, another way to illustrate this point. A lot of brands that are doing, 10, 20 million in revenue that we work with that are launching new products, the real savvy ones know that they need to create a cross-functional NPI team, new product introduction team. And so they'll get someone from marketing, someone from ops and supply chain, someone from finance, and anywhere else they need to pull, maybe manufacture, there's usually the manufacturers, and they'll bring them together on a cross-functional team that meets regularly from the very beginning of the process. And it's because, you know, there may be, you're talking about the interchange between, or the handoff between engineering and manufacturing, which seen that multiple times. We had to bring our engineer to China with us one time to meet with a factory because they both saw like, oh no, wait, you can't do that. That's not a steel safe mold change, right? Like all kinds of different things, right? But the other thing is there's other functions involved as well. Like, hold on a second, I can't sell that through our 3PL because they have constraints on packaging size, right? Or hold on a second, like the finance guys like, hold on a second, we can't do that because of this. And the point I'm making, going back to the very beginning of the episode, we're like, what's at stake if you're, whether you're like Clay said, a one-man show getting a product off the ground for the first time, a company off the ground, or you're an existing brand that's launching new products, you have to think about the impact on marketing, sales and marketing, operations, and then not just supply chain, also fulfillment and logistics, finance. You have to think about all of those things when you're developing and launching new products. And it takes a very, I would say it's actually the hardest function in the entire business because it literally draws on every discipline within business to get it right. And even furthermore, to get it right and do it right continuously. Right. And so that's why all of this stuff is so important. That's why we wanted to chat about this, is because there's a lot of capital. There's a lot of capital, explicit capital outlays during the new product development and launch phase that are at stake, but there's a lot of future capital outlays that are at stake as well, right? Because you bake so much into your business in the form of the decisions you make on new product development and new product launches. So, I think unfortunately we have to land the plane soon here, and obviously, like, man, we might have to have an episode for just each one of these stages because there really is a lot. But again, because it's such a multi functional and multi disciplinary process to launch new products. But before we like fully land the plane, key takeaways, like what are the big points that you want to make sure that the audience remembers from our conversation today, Clay?
Yeah, it starts with customer discovery, and customer discovery is never not done. And it continues even when you're in a fully manufactured state. To this day, I've been running this brand for 2 years. I, as the CEO and co-founder, still answer every one of our customer support tickets. And I do that not to say is like that customer support is below me as the founder. It is pivotal into me understanding, how do I make my product better? How do I make my instructions better? How do I create better online videos to sell my product better? So when we get, let's call it 10 to 20 on a normal day tickets a day. So let's call it 20 tickets a day. That's 20 customers that I get to actually have an interaction with. And not only does that build brand, meaning they get to talk to the founder, and it could be something as simple as, where's my order? Where's my tracking number? Or it could be something as, hey, when I insert the disc, if we put it in upside down, it gets jammed. Real life case, right? It happened. So it started happening more frequently. So then we designed a video to show how it was supposed to be done. And then we put up arrows on the discs to teach people how to put them in right. And then we created a video to teach people how to unstick their, like, basically disassemble the light to get the tray unstuck if they put their disc in upside down, right? So if I would have farmed out customer support, which a lot of people go, oh, you can farm this out to the Philippines for $8 an hour. You lose the connection to the customer. And then therefore you start losing on how to build the product better and how to build the brand better. And those are like things that it all comes back to customer, getting involved with the customer, and then iterating over time to basically get it perfected, right? So now on a customer support, I can start building in automations, and with macros to say, hey, if somebody puts in their stuck disk stuck, whatever form of writing that, I now can send them back automated videos and instructions on how to get their trays unstuck without me actually getting involved. Um, you know, as you're building out your supply chain, it really comes down to relationships. I buy stuff container load from China, and I buy stuff in different brands and work with small stuff in America to big stuff in America. And ultimately, the better the relationship I have, the the more willingness they're willing to help find problems, solve problems, cut costs when I need them. Like my manufacturer in China, I went to him right. It was during the election in November, and we're putting out a lot of cash to order inventory for Christmas. And I'm like, look, we're having to compete on a CPM basis with all the political ads. My advertising costs have gone up because we're just having to compete to buy it, right, on a cost CPM basis. Um, is there any way if we order more, or we work out a relationship, a little more of a longer term relationship, can we come down on costs?
Yeah.
Well, I've got a 2-year relationship with the guy, and now he's like, yeah, well, for this, we'll do this. And I'm like, okay, that's perfect. And then we had a tariff come in, unbeknownst to us. We weren't planning for 25% tariff. It was under exemption, and we had I think $17,000 bill hit us on that shipment. It's not good right before Christmas, but nonetheless, those are things you just kind of have to, start learning sometimes the hard way, and
Yeah.
then plan for them in the future so they don't happen again, or ways to get around them.
So start with the customer, stay with the customer, right? Leverage relationships, real relationships. And I'll say my last takeaway in summary is like, remember, we're trying to make the minimum capital investment to learn as much as possible to reduce risk before making the next capital investment. If you can remember that, you'll make better decisions around launching new products. Um, before we close, I actually realized, Clay, I don't know why. This is the only podcast episode, the last one we did, that I forgot to ask this. I want you to tell the listeners where they can find more information about you and In Paceline, because I think there's a lot of people that are going to listen to this that might benefit from potentially getting some help from you.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur. I believe in practicing what I preach, and staying in the game keeps me on my toes and keeps me active. So first and foremost, I run a company called Glory Light. It's GLORI light.com. But I also run and help other entrepreneurs and help other companies build up, scale up, and I do that through an organization I created called In Paceline. It's INPACELINE.com, inpaceline.com. I'm on all the socials, especially on Instagram at In Paceline, and I'm trying to put out more content to help other people kind of going through those same things that I've gone through, and Jon, quite frankly, you've gone through as kind of a founder, so that people don't make the same mistakes and same delays that I've had over the years. And yeah, I'd love to connect with anybody at inpaceline.com.
Yeah, definitely check out Clay's content. I highly recommend following him. And if you want any more helpful tips on scaling a D2C brand with a profit focused mindset, you can consider following me, Jon Blair, on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in learning any more about how Free to Grow's D2C accountants and fractional CFOs can help your brand increase profit and cash flow as you scale, check us out at freetogrowcfo.com. And Clay, I'm going to have you back on, maybe many times. Maybe we'll have to co-host a podcast sometime soon. We have a lot that we could chat about, but I appreciate you dropping some knowledge. I know that this episode is going to be helpful for our audience. So thanks for coming on. And everyone, until next time, scale on.
Scale on.